Hello, this is a history of SAPs, Blackjacks, and Slungshots. And what we're looking at here is a kind of SAP. This one is, a distant relative within our weapons family. Maybe not quite that distant. It's odd, like a lot of ours. It's odd, it's unusual, it's highly forgotten, because we are basically looking at a SAP that is a softened billy club. That is a horribly tortured phrase I came up with, but I really didn't have a choice because I don't think these ever had a name. That's how forgotten they are and really rare they were, even in their time. It's a contradiction. I mean, they got used enough that they were made and even mass-produced, but I don't think they ever bothered to slap a name on these. And I have all kinds of old catalogs showing them for sale, and they'll have kind of the manufacturer's patented name, but as a weapon, no, I don't think they even bothered to ever give this a description or its own unique handle. No pun intended, because the handle is actually one of the hallmarks of this weapon, as I've mentioned in a previous video. Now, a typical billy club is, of course, hardwood. Almost always, right? They've also been made out of plastic and whatnot, but especially back here in the 19th century, they were hardwood, and that is a lot easier to construct than what we are looking at here, because we're looking at a synthetic material, composite nature billy club. There are layers of a synthetic material, probably leatheroid. Leatheroid is not leather, actually, right? It's a strange name. It's kind of a fake leather they came up with back then. It has a rigid core of some kind, probably steel, but I have no idea. And then it's got this braided line handle, which is really beautiful. And again, the hallmark of this type of sap. And then there's a metal contraption at the bottom that we'll look at in a second. So think about these got like laminated layers of material forming the actual business end and most of this. Then it's got that kind of core. The exact nature I don't know because they use different methods, including whalebone, by the way, which is interesting, right? Because that was an old-time sailor sap handle to give flexibility. You've got this braid, you've got definite steel on the end here. You'd normally have a leather loop attached to that guy right there that we're looking at. And it takes a lot more to put that together, slap it all together, than to carve a piece of wood. So the question is why? Why go to that much trouble? Well, Edward Bean, you can look him up, was probably the first person to come up with this kind of contraption, but I can't say for sure, but he's definitely the first notable one. He's in the National Law Enforcement Museum. They call him arguably the most important police inventor of all time. And he wanted a club that would not break on you, because that's quite inconvenient, that would last longer, and that was easier to handle. And I'll add one thing to that. That swivel back there is to keep the weapon from being used against you by putting you in a painful wrist bind when you've got the leather loop around your wrist and someone starts wrestling it away from you. So 3, maybe 4 reasons. Here you can see the size, so it does count as a pocket club. They came in different sizes, but they're generally pretty small. And here's the swivel we were talking about. Look at that guy. Still works like a charm after all these years. So that way, if somebody grabs, wrestles the club away from you and kind of twists it away, you're fine because the leather loop would just kind of spin in place. Pretty neat. Here's the business end. You see that odd undulating shape? That gives you an indication of the strange composition. I think moisture and age has just kind of warped it over time. I'm going to try my best to get some, close-ups for you that are in focus. Probably won't go too well, but just look at the different spotting there. It's really strange. There's one kind of material covering this, and then, as we'll hopefully see, a totally different kind on the inside as well, which I thought was pretty strange. Something I should have mentioned when I was holding it is that this thing is very light, at least based on what you would expect. Now, if you know our weapons family, then you wouldn't be surprised, but it weighs like half a pound. So, again, it's a sap. There's another characteristic that lets it count as a sap. This thing is small, it's light, it's got a composite nature. This one might not be flexible, but it does have elasticity, right? That material, those layers and layers of material, give it the ability to absorb impact, so it at least, softens the blow, if not by flexing away from the victim, then by virtue of that elasticity. Let's talk timeline. Softened billy clubs, kind of layers of leather or a leather exterior. It's an odd family, small family within our larger family. Overall, I would say this was Civil War era, so mid-19th century to fairly late into the early 20th century, if you will. So I say that because Bean's clubs were made as late as 1936, and they're still being manufactured and sold even that far. But their heyday was probably around the 1870s, 1880s. John Tower was another inventor who did this kind of thing. And these would be featured at World's Fairs and that kind of things where the people would roll out inventions, and you'd see reviews of them in newspapers. Let's talk technique here for a second. You could strike, by thrusting with either end. That would be vicious right there. That was not the design, but that might be the worst way to hit somebody with it. And the general way, of course, would be to just swing and strike with this part here. Now, when I squeeze on there and shake, you can tell there's something else in there. Like I said, there's a core. Now I'm going to try to get a little flexibility out of it, and there's none, right? But some of these purposely were flexible, but just to show you that this is not one of them. If I look at that shape, it's just so odd. And so you had a wide variety here, right? So you could have one that's maybe certainly heavier and more rigid than another one. You could have one that's lighter and more flexible. So you could have a wide variety, and different materials are going to give different properties too, right? So some of these would be like leather discs around a shaft, all compressed together. That give you one kind of density. This guy here with that strange synthetic material that I'll try to show you looks like, it's definitely something machine made. I have no idea what it is, but layers and layers of that, and you can see how it's, changed shape and warped over time. That around probably a thin and light steel core. That's my guess on this guy. That's going to be a little bit different. And some of these were also, there'd be a wooden shaft. This one definitely does not have one because I can hear it rattling around in there, the metal. But you'd have a wooden shaft with you could have soaked leather or leatheroid, something like that, put over the shaft and then allowed to dry, so it kind of shrink and grab on. Again, so wide variety, and you're going to have different impact depending on which one, but they're always the same principle. As a martial artist, I'd say this one here, at least, I only have one example, but when I hold this in my hand, I'd say this does not feel so much like a force multiplier as most SAPs do. A lot of SAPs with that lead core, the flexibility to speed it up, to get that extra arc, that extra momentum, they feel like force multipliers. This one really feels like more of a kindness than a cruelty. I kind of picture an old-time cop just, whacking someone over the head repeatedly with this thing to subdue them, but it's not, adding to the blow so much. There's a fine line there. It certainly does. It's extra weight, it's extra length. That's going to give you more torque, but that's really the feel I get when I hold this in my hand. Is it's like it's meant to really minimize damage while subduing the subject. The patents that I've seen don't mention that in any way, but it really seems to be the design, the intent behind the design. As to precisely how effective was something like this, that's very difficult to say because we just don't have a lot of data points to work with. Reason for that is that old incidents, and tales involving police use back then, and I've read a lot of them, they're just not going to bother to differentiate what kind of billy club was used. It's only ever going to say, billy or club or something like that. It's a lot of guesswork then. I would say count this as kind of a lightweight SAP overall. I would not want to fight with this if I was defending myself, in a life and death situation. But for a cop who's got the situation under control and, wants a little extra assistance, I think you could definitely use this to overwhelm someone. And that is it for the odd and interesting world of soft, sometimes flexible, and always complicated police clubs of the late 19th century and early 20th. Thank you.